This went in. Messier's goal won't count.
Right. From one extreme to the other. Incredible.
The first morning news of the day now, read by Phil Roman at ITN.
Good morning. It's just after 5:30 on Thursday, the 4th of August. Welcome to ITN's Morning News. The headlines today. The rail dispute is set to worsen as signal box supervisors vote on strike action. Spanish fishermen attack Cornish tuna boats in a war over fishing nets. And the Queen Mother celebrates her 94th birthday today. Striking railway signal workers return to work at midday, but a few minutes later, their union is expected to announce the result of a ballot, which could worsen the rail dispute. 500 signal box supervisors, vital to Railtrack's strike-busting strategy, have been voting on whether to join the signalman strike. And there are signs that they narrowly favour taking industrial action. Ian Glover-James reports.
A signalman walks out as the strike deadline falls. But after 7 weeks of stalemate, the rail strike is stirring. This strike has cost the country nearly £100 million so far. Sir Bob Reid, appointed to oversee its privatisation, has written to both sides in the strike with this warning.
You can't run a railway losing 3 days every week. That's just not going to work. So you therefore have to take action as to how you're going to run that railway. Now that could have very serious implications for these people. It could have serious implications for their jobs, serious implications for their future. That needs to be put to them alongside the offer which has been put by Railtrack.
The rail union wasn't impressed.
It's a bit one-sided. It is a one-sided approach, and you know, that disappoints me a great deal. So we won't be changing our position in response to that letter.
But details of an improved Railtrack proposal to signal workers have now emerged. The original proposal back in June was worth 5.7% on average total earnings, but it was withdrawn, prompting the strike ballot. The revised offer was, according to the union, worth just 3.7% on total earnings. The latest proposal, which isn't an official offer as the two sides aren't talking, is worth 4.7% according to Railtrack, effectively splitting the difference. It was followed by this Railtrack circular to signal strikers. It claims their union's stand is a sham and says they've rejected every attempt to find a solution. Bob Horton, the part-time Railtrack chairman who came new to the railways from BP, topped that with a bizarre offer of his own that underlines the pressures on him to find a solution.
People seem to be worried about my level of pay, which is £120,000 a year. And I said that if my offering to give the difference between my pay and Mr. Knapp's pay to charity would help solve the dispute, then I would do that.
But more rail strike days lie ahead, and BR's warning to both sides shows the stakes are getting dangerously high for the future of the railways.
A Royal Navy fishery protection vessel is on its way to the scene of the latest confrontation in the Spanish tuna war. 6 British trawlers fishing for tuna in the Bay of Biscay were attacked by 11 Spanish trawlers yesterday. The crews say they were threatened and had fishing gear worth thousands of pounds cut away. The row has already hit thousands of holidaymakers taking ferries to Spain. Steve Scott reports.
The trawlers, all Cornish registered, were fishing for tuna 400 miles southwest of Land's End. There, without warning, they were ambushed by 11 Spanish fishing boats. On ship-to-shore radio, the captain of one of the fleet said their EC counterparts were so violent they had to turn around.
They came and surrounded us, came across our bow, came both sides of us. They were waving and shouting and threatening us. They grappled our gear, cut through our gear, and well, they just intimidated us so much. And it was, well, very frightening. We had to leave the situation, okay?
As the Pilot Star headed home to Newlyn in Cornwall, the fishery protection vessel HMS Anglesey set sail for the Bay of Biscay, just a week after Spanish trawlermen blockaded the port of Santander and forced the Brittany Ferries passenger ferry Val de Loire to abandon its trip and return to Roscoff in France. This action was directly connected to the ongoing tuna war between Spanish and French fishermen. Britain's trawlermen have been drawn into the dispute too.
The Bosnian Serb leader Radovan Karadzic has warned his people that they may have to fight an all-out war to defeat the latest plan for Bosnia, drawn up by the Five-Nation Contact Group. Yesterday, the Bosnian Serb Assembly rejected the plan and decided to put it to a referendum, which is expected to deliver the same verdict. ITN's diplomatic correspondent Jeffrey Archer reports.
Bosnian Serb gunmen opened up on the streets of Sarajevo as their leaders fired off another burst of defiance at the international community and their own allies. Tram passengers ducked to try to avoid the bullets, and UN soldiers fired back. The self-styled Bosnian Serb parliament rejected the international peace plan, then ordered a referendum on it. Their president, Radovan Karadzic, told them that they'd have to move to a full war footing and must expect their ally Serbia to close its borders with them. The international peace plan calls for a sacrifice which the Bosnian Serbs say is too great. They now control about 70% of Bosnia. Under the plan, they'd have to give up nearly a third of that, leaving them 49%. The remaining territory would go to the Federation of Croats and Muslims, who've accepted the deal. The area around Sarajevo and several other towns would come under international control, and the Serbs don't like that either. They want the future status of the capital clearly defined. Facing sanctions from the UN, sanctions from their allies, the ultimate threat to the Bosnian Serbs is that America might let the Muslims rearm with heavy weapons. But that's a threat they find hard to believe when the UN's own commander questions it.
My view about the lifting of the arms embargo, as indeed the view of many nations who contribute forces here, is that there would be very dire consequences, ultimately, to the people of this country.
For 3 weeks, gunfire has stopped the UN airlift of food into Sarajevo. Unless the snipers desist again, many fear that the hope for a long-term peace, which they've enjoyed for the past 6 months, is about to end.
The United Nations has been encouraging Rwandan refugees to return home from their overcrowded camps on the border with Zaire. The strong ones have made it back. Others, mainly the elderly and children, have found the journey from Goma to Kigali, 120 miles away, too much. Hundreds are dying on the way of hunger and disease. ITN's Mark Austin is there.
Tiny feet on the long road home, and for some, it's the last journey they'll ever make. These are the people who've been persuaded to leave the cholera-ridden camps of Goma and head back to Rwanda. But for weak, war-weary women and children, it's an 8-day walk to Kigali, and there's little on offer on the way. 60 miles along the road, the one makeshift medical centre is overwhelmed. Predictably, it's the very young and the very old who suffer most: dysentery, cholera and exhaustion. A father carries in his infant girl, clearly close to death. Doctors from the French charity Médecins Sans Frontières do what they can to save her, but they tell us she won't survive.
Everybody just dies in your hands. You pick them up from the road and they die before they reach the truck. It's horrible.
After 4 months of war, displacement and disease, the people of Rwanda continue to suffer, even on their way home. It's become a process of natural selection. The strong survive, and as for the weak, well, we're now 2 days' walk from Goma, and they're falling by the wayside. For the first time, 2 lorries are on the route, bringing in the weakest refugees. But 2 lorries for thousands of people are nowhere near enough.
There are some sick people here who want to go on to Ruangari, like this man here. He's lost 2 children, he's got 5 more.
More vehicles are planned, but it'll be next week at the earliest before they arrive.
The transport capacity will be augmented greatly next week and the week after that.
But for the next few days, the people will continue to walk.
That's right. That's right.
And suffer.
And suffer, because this is a tragic situation, a situation which has devastated this country.
Some of the sick have family to carry them, but not all. These 2 children lost their parents to cholera in Goma. They can barely walk any further. Someone urges them on. But how long will they survive on Rwanda's road of misery?
Hopes for an IRA ceasefire have been given a boost by Gerry Adams, the president of the IRA's political wing Sinn Féin. He says he's talked to the IRA's leadership about a temporary ceasefire and is guardedly optimistic that things could move forward. But as ITN's Ireland correspondent Tom Bradby reports, for now the violence continues.
Another IRA attack on the security force base at Newton Hamilton, the second in a month. 3 soldiers were injured and the damage inside the base was said to be superficial, though the effects were also felt in the town. The army spent the day carrying out the slow process of examining the jeep from which the mortars were fired. And another reminder of IRA violence, the funeral of Joe Bratty, the loyalist murdered on Sunday. Despite the violence, the IRA is now clearly considering a ceasefire. Gerry Adams, the Sinn Féin president, was asked directly whether he had discussed the issue with the IRA. He said simply, yes, he had. Under the government ban, we can't use his voice, but he said it would be wrong to discuss details, but added that, as a result of the discussions, he was now guardedly optimistic. There is, in fact, a good deal of guarded optimism in many circles here, but progress depends on a number of factors. Whether the IRA does finally declare a ceasefire and for how long, what the response of the 2 governments is, and what the attitude of the loyalist terrorists will be. The situation is still delicate, and the process, even if begun, can so easily be derailed.
More than 1,700 people were caught trying to smuggle drugs through the 3 London airports in the 12 months up to March, the most ever. The drugs seized would have been worth £75 million on the streets, although in many cases they were brought in for personal use and not for sale. Our Home Affairs correspondent Harry Smith reports from Gatwick.
It's their most successful year yet in the battle against drugs, but customs officers say the smugglers are getting smarter by the day. This drinks can looked innocent enough, but the lining was false and the space packed with cocaine. A record split down the middle was coated with cannabis.
This record wasn't on its own, there were several boxfuls, so though there was only a small amount in here, the total quantity added together was quite substantial. This is quite a common concealment, and the heel of the shoe has been hollowed out. You can see more clearly on this one. Leaves quite a large space to conceal drugs in there.
Every year, more than 70 million travellers pass through London's 3 airports. Today's figures show that on an average day, 5 of them will be caught trying to smuggle drugs.
Customs officers say about 2/3 of those caught are carrying relatively small amounts for personal use. But there are growing signs that big-time dealers are once again targeting Britain.
The United States of America is traditionally the biggest market for illicit drugs. There are some signs that it's peaked there, and so that the drug traffickers are looking to build up their other markets, and that's where we come into the front line.
And it's not just a battle against drugs. This python found wriggling under a man's shirt is just one of a growing number of rare reptiles being seized by customs. If they get through, they can sell for hundreds of pounds.
The Queen Mother celebrates her 94th birthday today. It's been a busy year for her, and although she's had occasional bouts of ill health, she continues to play a full part in public life. Later this morning, there'll be a march past at Clarence House and a 41-gun salute. Some well-wishers have been queuing all night to be sure of a good view.
It's exciting to see them. You get to see the entire royal family. They all come out, and there's a walkabout, so you get to talk with the Queen Mother, give her flowers. And it's really a lot of fun.
Well, she's given her life of devotion to us, and now we repay it for 94 years, isn't it?
It's now 18 minutes to 6. You're watching the morning news from ITN. We'll take a short break. Coming up, the child taken from his mother and deported from Hong Kong on Chris Patton's orders.
Come on, let's have a little go in the bathroom. Ready, steady, go! Shall we go in now? We're going to go plop in the bath. Let's have a sponge, shall we? It's a good thing. Right, look, you play with the turtle. I'll only be a minute. Hello? It's fine, I'm just giving him a bath. I'll call you back. Look, I've got to get back to him. Oh, right.
A child can drown in a few centimetres of water in a bath pond or pool and in less than a minute.
Your name, please.
George Watling.
Occupation
Your grandfather.
and your chosen specialised subject.
Road safety for the older pedestrian.
What proportion of pedestrians killed on the roads are over 60 years old?
About half.
Correct. What is the best way to avoid being involved in a road accident?
Choose the safest time possible for your trip. Think about your trip so that you can cut down on the number of times you have to cross the road.
Correct. Where should you cross the road?
At a pedestrian crossing.
Correct. What should you do about approaching vehicles?
Assess their speed to make sure there's time to cross. Watch out for any unexpected turns towards you.
Correct. And the drivers of these vehicles?
Check that the driver has seen you and that he's doing what you expect.
Correct. What? I've started, so I'll finish. What present are you and Grandma giving me for Christmas?
Pass.
Thank you, Mr. Watling. At the end of that round, you scored 10 points and passed on only one, which, if I may suggest, should be a computer.
Portable heaters are perfectly safe as long as they're used sensibly. But get too close and it may not be just you that feels the heat. Portable heaters may seem like a good way to dry clothes, but you may find they're too close for comfort. A portable heater may be an easy way to move heat around in your home. But it could be the last move you make. A portable heater is perfectly safe when used properly. Moved when a light or placed too close, it can become a time bomb.
Welcome back to ITN's Morning News. Today's top story: the result of a strike ballot of signal box supervisors comes out today, and it could bring a major escalation of the rail dispute. A man appears in court today after a shootout in southwest London in which one man died and a policeman was wounded. The shooting has stirred up the debate about where armed criminals get their guns and how police can deal with them. ITN's Kevin Dunn reports.
The death of an armed robber on London streets, police say he shot himself after being cornered and wounded, has led to renewed calls for tighter gun control. Police recovered several firearms, including a semi-automatic shotgun of Italian origin. Police say the incident highlights a dramatic increase in the number of firearms finding their way into criminal hands.
In Cumbria, only 2 days ago, a machine gun was used in a bank robbery, the first time they've seen automatic weapons used in that way. In London, a police officer was shot with an Uzi machine gun. So these highly sophisticated weapons are now on our streets being sold and traded amongst the criminal fraternity.
The number of firearms offences, including murders and robberies, has soared in the past decade, from 8,400 in 1982 to more than 13,300 in 1992. And the latest crime figures show that in the past year, gun attacks on police in London increased sixfold. The last victim, community policeman Patrick Dunn, who was murdered last October. Especially disturbing are the types of guns now being seized by police. This haul in Merseyside included a Kalashnikov and an Uzi. Police chiefs want tougher penalties for possession.
People who use firearms for criminal means should know they're facing jail for a long, long time. That's what the public want, and that's what the whole of the criminal justice should set out to deliver.
West Mercia Police operate the most advanced firearms training in the country. They use triple-screen video to put police marksmen in simulated, life-threatening situations.
All police officers, drop the gun! Drop the gun! Kids, get out! Get out, kids! Drop the gun!
Situations the marksmen are increasingly acting out for real.
Although unemployment is down and factory output's up, figures on another key part of the economy, the housing market, show that it still hasn't yet taken off. Sales are still slow, and according to Britain's biggest mortgage lender, the Halifax Building Society, prices have crept back up by only 0.2% since the start of the year. Our economics editor Ruth Lee reports.
3 tons of stuff.
Moving house, a major financial decision for most people. But in the 1990s, caution is the order of the day. With unemployment still high, declining help from the government, and fears of higher interest rates, the housing market does not seem set for boom times.
The market seemed to be going in the right direction, but not so much that it was scary or, you know, that it was... people were getting out of their minds about grabbing up places.
Yeah, we certainly didn't feel that we had to move very quickly, that if we hesitated for a month that things were going to change very dramatically.
But it was very different in the late 1980s. According to the Halifax, average house prices more than doubled between 1983 and 1989, peaking at £70,000. As recession took hold, prices slumped, and by the start of 1993, they had lost £10,000. Since then, they have picked up, despite some setbacks.
What we want to see and what we think is likely to happen, given no setbacks to the recovery as a whole, is this very gradual pickup in the housing market. So this spring and summer will be seen as somewhat of a blip, and the kind of recovery we were seeing will be continued.
It is different this time, and house prices are most unlikely to rise in the future as they did in the 1980s or the 1970s or the 1960s. And the recent slump in prices tells you